Sorry about that. We'll jump right in. You obviously didn't hear my first time around, so I'm just going to repeat what I said. Before we get started, we just want to make a couple of quick announcements. We love questions, so please, if you have any, send them through the chat box to the host, and we'll try to answer them as they come in during the webinar or maybe as a follow-up after. We'll be recording today's webinar and making that available also to you, so no need to furiously take some notes. All right, let's jump in with some quick introductions. My name is Pablo, and in my current role at Habanero, I work closely with our clients to enhance their online and brand experiences. Coming from a marketing and communications background, I'm definitely excited about what responsive design can do for different organizations. And most of this excitement actually has come over the last couple of months here working closely with Jazz. I've been able to learn a lot from her. And Jazz is both an experienced practitioner and thought leader within the user experience domain. In fact, she teaches a 2-day course called User Experience Done Right that runs right across Canada. Jazz was also a key member in the planning and design of HabaneroConsulting.com, and she's going to provide us with some really great takeaways here later today. For those of you that are new to Habanero, we're super passionate about helping people and organizations thrive. So what does that mean? Well, we believe that thriving workplaces lead to great organizations and that technology can play an important role in helping to make this kind of impact. And we do this with our clients. We've been doing this by creating exceptionally designed and well-liked employee portals and intranets, customer portals and websites, and member portals and extranets. Today's webinar, we're going to focus on customer portals and websites, and more specifically on creating a responsive experience for your customers. So our goal today is to share with you our experience around how we tackled some of the trends that are associated with responsive design. And if there's one takeaway we want to leave you with, it's that responsive design is not a trend. It's the new norm. Of course, this is our point of view, but it's based on what we've been seeing out there. Think about it. The way people are sharing and consuming information has changed and continues to change. Smaller websites are going responsive first because it's less technically complex as an approach. And large organizations are starting to feel the pain of having to manage multiple sites with differing content. So with this in mind, let's start with a quick overview of responsive design, and then what we're going to do is move on to our case study and some recommendations for going responsive. So what's responsive design? Well, it's probably safe to say that when most people hear the term, they associate it with creating a mobile experience. And while we think that it's more than just mobile, mobile experiences can be broken down into two groups. You got your mobile websites and your mobile apps. We're not going to get into mobile apps today. So what we're going to do is more focus on the mobile website and basically look at the two types that fall within this group. There's the dedicated site and the responsive site. Most of us are probably already familiar with dedicated sites. At Habanero, we've been building dedicated sites for a while now, and YVR.ca is a great example of one of these. In a nutshell, YVR's website provides essential information on flights, airport services, and notifications. And when it came to their mobile site, they were looking to create a targeted and cost-effective experience. Now, while a dedicated site can be inexpensive and an effective way to go, the biggest downside is that it's a separate site and that when people want to share or consume mobile content, it doesn't really work. So after reviewing the analytics and trends, we were seeing that more and more people on a growing number of different devices were visiting the mobile site, but that they were looking for things that weren't there. So here, this is where responsive design comes into play. Responsive design is more than just adapting to different browsers. A responsive website can help organizations to engage and connect to one consistent experience across any device. If you think about it, we've come a long way from only thinking about the PC experiences. And if organizations want to stay relevant, they need to start revisiting their online strategies. So with this in mind, I'm going to pass the floor over to Jazz to share some of our stories and some of our recommendations for going responsive.
Great. Thanks, Pablo. Well, welcome everybody online too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in and we're going to talk about a recent example where we've gone through a responsive design approach, and that's actually with our own website, HabaneroConsulting.com. And I'll step back and just to show you, this is our old site from about 5 to 7 years ago. And we've had it for a number of years, or we did have it for a number of years, and it was okay, it held up. It didn't really, though, one of the biggest problems with it, it didn't explain what we did in a really rich way and really explain some of our story. So we decided as well, when we had this site, we launched it, we looked at it actually on an iPad, and it seemed to be okay, but we really felt we needed to, after the fact, add on a mobile site. So we had a full desktop site, and we added on a mobile site as kind of a separate, dedicated experience, similar to that YVR example. And this mobile site, it kind of provided a subset of information that we thought was the most useful to this audience, the team directory so people can find us and look up our phone number, news information, as well as blog posts. And what we did is we really made an assumption. We guessed what we thought people would want on a mobile site, and we just optimized for that. And this was actually, it turned out to be difficult as time went on. It turned out to be a bit of a mistake. We realized in our analytics, our mobile site was getting a lot of visits, and we saw people coming from different devices, and they weren't just visiting the areas that we optimized, the team directory, the news, the blog posts. They were going to hiring, careers, case studies, and all those other things. So it resulted also, a big challenge for us was not only in the visits and our audience being able to access the things they needed, but also for us internally. We had two different things we needed to maintain, two places where we have to update look and feel, content, code. So our goal really for a new site was to create something that was fully responsive, something that was really rich. We wanted something that didn't feel like a typical responsive site. We wanted it to really showcase our brand and our people and our photography. That was a big thing for us. And I feel like this is a really important consideration for any kind of site or any kind of company that wants to share this kind of information. You want something that's rich and really tells your whole story. We also wanted something that obviously would increase engagement, get people to want to explore our site and find out more about us, and result in conversions. And we don't necessarily have, conversion targets or hard numbers. We're looking at more of the softer side of things. Are we getting high-quality contacts from our website, newsletter subscribers, and those kinds of things? So you have to look at your situation as well and figure out what those conversions are and what that means to you. Just to also let you know, as part of our redesign, we also, as a separate project, we had a new brand come in. So that was kind of fun and exciting. We were all really proud of it. It really reflected our people. That's important to us. And we use office photography, real people in our office doing sometimes fun and crazy things, but also work things. And that's really something that we wanted to make sure came through in our new site, is this new brand, new messaging, new tone. Another sort of aspect to this, and it's kind of outside of responsive, but it helped us achieve our goals with coming up with a responsive site, is we wanted to build on a new platform, Sitecore. We were really excited about this. It had a lot of digital marketing features that we thought could be really useful for our audience. So things like being able to personalize content and target content to people based on their region or based on their industry, that was something we felt we could leverage, and Sitecore is a really powerful platform in that aspect. So we wanted to build on this, so that was a big part of this as well. And the other the other considerations, just to set the context for this project, we had a really tight timeline. We had sort of a drop-dead date that couldn't be moved. We had Stephen, our president, talking at the Great Place to Work conference, and it's a national conference. We wanted to have a website that was up and running and that really showcased us in a great way for this conference. So a new brand, sort of a newer technology, or moving our website to a new technology, as well as a tight timeline. We had to do all of this in 4 months. So a bit of a challenge, but something we don't shy away from. We love it. So why a responsive site? You might be asking, sort of digging into some of this. I mentioned this before. We came from a place where we had a mobile site and a full site, and we wanted to get down to one site for just a lot of ease of maintenance and updating content, as well as the code and the brand, just one place to do that, one source of truth. As well, we wanted to get out of thinking about all these different devices. It was getting really challenging to think about all the different scenarios that people could be accessing our site. In 2011, we had about 50 different devices. So you'll probably, if you have analytics on your own site, you can take a look and you can see at all the different devices people are using, and you'll probably see quite a long tail, quite a number of different devices people are using. And so we experienced just year over year, it tripled. And I know it's just probably just going to keep getting worse. We can't necessarily keep up with all the different devices people are using in their day-to-day lives. Also thinking about responsive, another thing that comes into play is not only thinking about just mobile devices or those kinds of things, but also thinking about these new technology that's coming out. You might have heard of Retina, that's kind of the Apple speak for this kind of technology, or high DPI or high dots per inch screens. And these screens are being used in all kinds of things, laptops, netbooks, tablets, smartphones, etc. And what this means really is that images and text can be very crisp, as long as that image is designed for those devices, so it has the number of pixels that these devices need. And this is really important to us because, like I said, our brand is heavily dependent on photography, and we wanted to make sure that no matter what somebody was using, if they were using one of these high DPI devices or they were using a regular device, they got that full experience. We wanted things to look crisp and clean and rich. So that might also be a consideration for you to move to responsive, is these devices will get more and more common as time goes on. Another reason we were looking at responsive was we're having a challenge actually with our search engine optimization and looking at Google. We had two different sites. We had a mobile site and a desktop site, as you saw before. And what this does with Google and other search engines is it basically separates or splits your ranking. You have two different sites, and so these search engines, they don't know what your authoritative source is. And so it's important for us to have a site where everything is accessible, one source of truth, and that'll help us with our search engine optimization as well. Also, if you think about content, content doesn't only exist on your own site. People are sharing things on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And this kind of thing is really important for us as well. If we want people to share whatever they want to share, and they're looking at it on their mobile device or other devices, they should be able to access that, not just on the areas that we think people are going to be sharing. So we wanted everything to be accessible for search engines and for sharing on social networks. Just to dig a bit deeper too, to help us build our case for our responsive site, we look at analytics. We do that often with a lot of our projects, but especially for a responsive project as well. And we saw our visits to our mobile site was increasing quite a bit. This is pretty, if you look at sort of the overall context of this, it's about 10%. That's what we were seeing at the beginning of this year in 2013. We're a B2B company or a business-to-business company, so we know a lot of our audience looks at our site on PCs. And generally with our clients and our customers, we see about 15 to 20% of visits going to a mobile area or from mobile devices. So this might be something that you want to take a look at in your own analytics and understand these trends. Another sort of minor point related to this is it was getting more and more common that if we looked at our top pages, basically the places that people were going to across the whole site, whether it was a mobile site or not, what are those things that are drawing people's attention? It was happening more and more that the mobile site, there might be a blog post or a news article in there, was getting up there in terms of the top 10 rankings of the places people were going to. So this is something too as a side note that we observed. Email usage. So we send out a newsletter. It's probably pretty common. A lot of companies send out newsletters through email. And we were seeing open rates for that newsletter increase on mobile or sort of non-PC devices. So those are smartphones and tablets. At the beginning of this year, we're almost at a quarter of our audience opening newsletters on email. And what that means is that when people are clicking through or going to different places on our site, they might be coming from different devices, not necessarily their PC or their laptop. And we were seeing that other places like our case studies and hiring were garnering a lot of attention, so we wanted to make sure those were optimized for different devices. And again, this really helps us build a case for investing in a responsive site. So with that kind of set up, we decided we wanted to go forward. So now what do? How do we actually start this project? So one of the first things we do, we're about our people, so we needed to assemble the core team, the core people that would be part of this project. And so we had a project manager, we had a user experience folks, myself and Brad. We brought in a technical team pretty early on as well, so we had front-end developers who are focused on the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, which really makes the magic happen with a responsive site. We had people familiar with Sitecore, our platform, so our architecture and development team, infrastructure. As well, we brought in our marketing and communications expert, Chris, really early on to help us with our content and our messaging, and our QA as well. And one note for testing is, it's kind of a common thing to leave that to the end, but with a responsive site, we're seeing because the variety of devices and the variety of experiences we want our site to look great across, we need to have quality assurance or testing involved as soon as possible. So another thing we thought about right at the beginning is how do we want to approach the design? Do we want to think about doing a desktop-first approach? Well, no, we knew that was probably not the best way to go. We know that there's definitely a big thing that we've done as part of other projects, and a big trend that we talk about as well on our own blog is mobile-first. So looking at what are the key scenarios, what are the key tasks that people might need to do on mobile devices. And this was something that we started off with, and we realized pretty quickly it's not going to work. What we found is the more realistic scenario for a lot of our responsive sites is to create a story across all of these devices at once. So we want to look at the sort of large-ish experience, I'll call it, or the medium-ish experience, as well as the small-ish experience. We want to look at all of those things together, and it's really a partnership. You're moving between those different things at the same time. So it really, it creates some tension, it creates some difficulty in the project, potentially if you're not used to doing that, but it's really important to be flexible when you're thinking about a responsive approach, and thinking about these scenarios at the same time is how we've found is the most effective way to do it. Another thing that we thought about right at the beginning was we wanted to try out content first. We had a new brand, but we didn't necessarily have all of our messaging and our content developed. And so we thought we would step back and look at that content first before we did anything else, before we look at the design. And we know that this is a big trend as well, and we hear lots of people talking about it, but looking at content first can be really valuable because you get out of thinking about design as just a decoration or an add-on at the end, and you can focus on what you want to say first. However, for us, it was a disaster. It did not work. We floundered at the beginning doing all this content stuff. We really struggled with what would this look like, how would we do it, and again, thinking about how all these things work together, it was more realistic for us to get design folks and content folks together and figure out this stuff as a partnership at the same time. So what we did is we stepped back, we basically sequestered ourselves, and we did collaborative sketching workshops. So we got together a mixed team, and this is really important, especially for a responsive site, is to bring different perspectives together in the same room. And we sketched it out, hammered it out over the course of a few days, and figured out our approach for how an experience could scale across different devices. And this, I just wanted to mention too, and I don't want to beat this point to death, but it's really important that you plan for this and you also plan a little bit of a coping mechanism. It can be really hard to have technical people in the room, UX and content folks all together with different points of view and kind of hammering this out. We found it was helpful having technical folks in the room right at the beginning because responsive sites depend a lot on HTML and JavaScript and different technical functionality, and it helped us figure out not only constraints, so places that maybe something's not going to be possible or won't be performant, but also opportunities where we could think of something in a different way. The content piece is really important as well. We started to put real words, real text into our sketches, which helped bring our designs together, I think, a lot more effectively. We took a little bit of time, and after we did the sketching workshop, we did all that on walls and just with whiteboards. We took a bit of time, and we just refined some of our sketches as needed. And we just used a tool called Balsamic. Some of you might have heard it. It's pretty quick and easy. We found that it works pretty well across Macs and PCs, and it's also really easy to copy and paste content if you're getting content from emails or Word documents, whatever you're doing. It's just easy to paste it in there, and you don't have to worry about formatting. It also was just really quick for us to explore options for things that maybe we ended up not building. And this is actually something we ended up not building. But we have all of this stuff in case we're actually planning to do more releases with our site. So we have all of this to help us with the planning in the future. So I recommend taking a bit of time to do that if you need to explore different ideas as well as document details or requirements. So mockups. We moved into mockups quite quickly. It's pretty much after the sketching, we decided we need to establish a design direction. And we went through, which is pretty common on a lot of our projects, we went through several iterations. And so you're seeing that there, our design kind of evolved over time as we got feedback and we reviewed it with different folks, our different stakeholders internally. One thing I found with the mockup process, though, is that it is really tough working out full pages in programs like Photoshop or other design applications because these files can get really big. I mentioned Retina and high DPI images or devices before, and so we wanted images that were really rich and really dense, and these make file sizes huge. It actually delayed us a little bit. We were experiencing a lot of trouble with performance and being able to execute on design quickly. So what I would recommend is kind of focus on full pages if you need to for maybe 1 or 2 key places, review that with stakeholders, get sign-off on design direction, and then move into focusing on more components or more panels. And so the way that we think about our site and a lot of different responsive kind of pages or layouts is looking at panels. What are the different components and what can we reuse across the site? So we reused this panel here for case studies across different parts of our site, and we reused something we call the big image panel. We reused that in several places as well. And so we would have, if I could go back in time, and hindsight is always 20/20, I would have probably focused more on these components and less on maybe some of the bigger pages because they can be quite time-consuming. One way, I just wanted to throw this out as an idea of one way of focusing on components or focusing on different pieces of your design is to look at something like style tiles. And there's a website there, you can check it out. This is something that we're moving towards more and more is pairing our refined sketches or our refined wireframes with something like style tiles, which really helps set the design direction and help us move forward in a more effective and more efficient way. So one thing we tried to do as well is we knew we needed to move into the live site as fast as possible, and this is really important with a responsive design approach. If you want to start to get things into code, you want to see how it works, how it feels. And our user experience developers or our front-end developers, they were really the ninjas on this project. They got us moving forward and making decisions, really important design decisions, in the code once we saw it working on a screen. One of the sort of the decisions that often comes up in responsive projects is looking at breakpoints, and it is crazy. It is getting more and more crazy as time goes on. There's tons of different devices, and basically when you're looking at devices, you're looking at widths and what are the different resolutions of these different devices, and it's really tough to keep on top of. And so I find that this is almost an impossible challenge. It's just a bit of a mess. And what I prefer to do and what we tried to do in this project was look at breakpoints from the point of what is a literal breakpoint where content and design just looks bad, where content becomes unreadable, where the design looks off. To me, that's a place where you need to add a breakpoint. It could be a major or a minor breakpoint, but it's a place that you need to look at as here's where a breakpoint makes sense. And it's less about keeping up with all the different devices and the resolutions. And this is actually an example up on the screen of a full sort of the desktop traditional 1024 width screen. This is for our careers page. And it has some content. It looks okay. It seems readable, easy to scan. There's some images on there. And what we actually screwed up on this. We should have introduced another breakpoint for the width that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen. This is more of a larger smartphone or a smaller tablet, or I don't know if you've heard the word phablet. It's kind of a phablet view. And this is probably a place where we should have introduced a minor breakpoint and had text that was a little bit easier to read so it didn't spread that full width across, and also images that seem out of proportion with the rest of the page. So we should have done something better with the size of the images there. So this is a constant battle. It's a constant process, and you're going to constantly be looking at where does my stuff, where does my site look bad, and how can I make this better? That doesn't make any sense. We probably said this so much on this project, I can't believe it. Once we saw something, we realized that does not make any sense. And a prime example of this, and so be prepared for this on your own projects if you're undergoing it. A prime example for us was looking at our contact page. We came up with a design pattern that was pretty basic. Basically, anything on the right-hand side of a page we assumed would be less important than what was in the main content area or on the left-hand side of the page. And so what would happen in our responsive scenarios is if the screen width changed, the right-hand side column of content would go below what was ever in the main content. However, it didn't make sense on this scenario. On our Contact Us page, we had a form that was in the main area and then all of our locations and phone numbers. In the sort of smartphone, or you can imagine a smaller device scenario, what would happen is that form would be at the top, but it doesn't really make any sense. People are probably looking more for our address and our location and our phone number. So in this case, we broke our design pattern, and it really came together for us when we actually saw the experience. When we held it in our hand, when we were just trying it out in the office, we realized it doesn't make any sense. So don't be afraid to break patterns if you need to. It's important to be really flexible in these kinds of projects. Another thing that helped us as well, looking at breakpoints and looking at how we needed to adapt our content, was quickly previewing how things would look. And I mentioned Sitecore earlier, and there's lots of different content management systems. This one actually had a useful tool called device rendering, and it allowed us to look at different pages as we were working on them quickly in sort of an emulator mode, so looking at different devices. And it had smartphones, tablets, even TV screens as well. What I'd caution you, though, even though there might be tools like this out there in your content management system, nothing really replaces having the device in your hand, having the physical device. So we try to have access to, in our testing as well as in our development process, as many devices as possible, and it's almost like we can never have enough. We can't keep up. We need more and more devices to make sure that stuff is working. So just talking about authoring, one thing that comes up, and it comes up on a lot of our projects, and you might be in a similar situation, is HTML. How much HTML should we be looking at adding, or that our content authors are doing, versus adding it into code and development? And there isn't really a right way of doing this. It's just a common challenge, and you have to look at how much flexibility you need on your site for different layouts or different panels, and then figure out if you need HTML skills to meet that flexibility, or if you can build components that kind of work their magic and authors don't have to worry about the HTML. So it's an important consideration when you're looking at how you're going to actually put the site together. And content management systems, like Sitecore and like us, tons of others out there, they have obviously tools that help authors put together all the content, and so you don't need HTML often for common tasks. And this is just an example of a news article view on our site. It's pretty standard. You can see that there's different components you can edit right in place. We also made all of our panels drag and drop so that we could move panels up and down as needed on different pages. And that's something that was really easy for our authors and our content creators to do. However, we are very kind of flexible, and we wanted to make sure we had rich pages that could really share our story. And so one invaluable tool that our user experience developer, Chris, created was an authoring guide. And this is something that we still use to this day. 3 months after we launched our site, we're referring to this guide, and I recommend taking time out to create something like this because it helps you figure out or document all of the decisions you've made, and also to bring other people up to speed. People that might not have been involved in the project, they can understand how the site works and the different options you have when you're creating content. And so this page, this document actually is something that's a website, and it goes on and on. So I can just show you some of it here. There's standard things like headings and how you adapt different text, looking at different alignment of text and these kinds of things. We're a very kind of flexible and creative organization, so we like to have lots of options. So we had tons of options for buttons, and this is just different ways you can add those things. We're going to talk more about images coming up, but this was also just some tips and tricks for dealing with different types of images to work across different devices and scenarios. We had standard things like bullets and lists, kind of goes on and on. One thing I wanted to point out here is the grid. This is something that was really cool for me to see, and I'm probably a bit of a nerd, but it helped me understand the different panel options we have and how we can adapt and how we can change our content to really tell that message in an effective way. And this had some sort of advanced HTML options for places where we wanted to change the grid and adapt and shift our content. So I found this really useful, and if your authors are kind of wanting to have that kind of flexibility, I recommend using a tool like this to help them get up to speed and figure out what they can do. So another thing we did, and unfortunately we did it really late in the project, is something called usability testing. We actually did usability testing after we launched our site, which is something I definitely do not recommend. We always learn something in usability testing, and I think we were just probably a little too cocky, and we thought, we can worry about it later, and we'll figure it out. And lo and behold, we learned some big things in usability testing that we probably should have accounted for earlier. And so what I find is you actually need to test more and not less with responsive design. So I'll just show you a couple of examples of things that came out for our testing. We designed pages that were long and that they were scrolling, and this is something that we did on purpose. We felt that on a touch device or a touch experience, scrolling is actually really natural. You just use your fingers, you go up and down, and that's a bit easier to do than tapping something. And so we made that kind of conscious decision. We knew this was the way we wanted to go. We sort of went bold and we went for it. But what we found is in the desktop experience, it can create some challenges. We actually did this inadvertently. We cut off our bottom of our screen on a 1024 by 768 resolution, right where that gray bar shows up, and that created an experience where people didn't know the page went on. So we adapted that. We made the page actually even longer, so the image even bigger, so that didn't happen, and people got an understanding that there's more content below that they scroll and they can explore our site that way. It's still a challenging aspect, though, and something we're still looking at and trying to work through in different scenarios. However, I find on tablets or smartphones where people are touching these screens, it's not really an issue. Scrolling is something more natural. Another thing, just to kind of point out, maybe another design tip for you guys is call to action. We have a lot of case studies, a lot of stories that we want to share and want people to visit them if they're interested. And what we found was the call to actions on touch devices, because we really focused on sort of touch being a core scenario for us, and we almost designed this touch first, is the call to actions were really visible on touch devices. People didn't have any problems going into case studies. But on desktop screens, it was a little bit harder, a little bit more of a challenge when people are using their mouse. They didn't realize that these things are clickable. So that's another area that we're looking at improving in our next release. So those are some of our big learnings from responsive design, and I have some additional recommendations, additional tips and tricks for you guys as well. So bonus round. So what we wanted to do when we thought about our mobile or smartphone experience, we had this question, what do we want to focus on first? Our original site, our dedicated mobile site that we were coming from a few years ago, focused more on the different areas of our business and the different sections. But in this case, what we decided is we were going to prioritize content and our stories first. So we put more emphasis on that and less emphasis on the different parts, the navigation and that kind of thing. So you can see our menu is kind of hidden. So that's kind of a choice you want to make up front, is figure out what is your focus and then how will all that work together. Another best practice, or another thing that we thought about right from the beginning was performance. We're really lucky. We have some good developers who kind of put their hat on for performance right from day one. So we made sure anything we kept adding to our site as time went on didn't affect performance. And one thing we had to look at was the design of our team directory. So this is our area where you can see all of our people, you can find their information, you can read about them, and it's a pretty long page. So we didn't break up this page. We decided, nope, we were just going to have everything there. As soon as somebody gets there, they can see everyone. And so what we did here is a small thing. We just load content on demand. So we don't keep up the page from loading if not all the images are there. We just load it as people scroll. And also in the mobile scenario, we took this into account as well. We only load the images when someone actually taps on someone's name. And that's another decision you have to make. You have to balance performance and that experience. Like I said, images. So images were a big part of our project, and what we decided to do was, and especially for this particular responsive site, we had to make sure that all of our images looked great across all the different devices, and they had the right size. And we chose basically 4 different image sizes for our site. And we ended up, having to create these images, but there's a lot of tools out there, and so you want to make sure you're using the right content management system or the right framework that can resize these images for you, and it will make your life a lot easier, so you don't have to worry about that as much manually. However, it can be more than just about resizing images. Sometimes we just think about, oh yeah, just put it at the back of our mind, we can just scale it down, don't have to worry about it. But there might be some areas of your site that are more complex that you need to think about, how is this image actually going to adapt? Does it need to change our focus? Do we need to actually zoom it out or zoom it in? Or do we need to lay out, essentially, the image? We had a section of our site that basically explains our hiring process. It's kind of this workflow diagram. And we chose to make this an image just for efficiency's sake. We could have done something with HTML and made it really fancy, but we were running out of time, so we made this an image. And when we thought about the actual different smartphone or mobile experience or different device or different size, we had to actually change how this image was laid out. So instead of being more horizontal, it was actually more vertical. And this is a minor point, but it's important to not just think about all your images as behaving the same, if that's important to you, and think about how that experience might need to change across different situations. Another thing to kind of discuss at the beginning is thinking about browsers. We decided early on that we were going to be future-friendly, we were going to move forward, and we were going to drop support for Internet Explorer 6 and 7. And we know that our audience, there are situations where you have to use IE6 and IE7. So what we did was it doesn't actually load properly, but we put a little message at the top. We're really, really sorry, our site might not look or behave the best in your browser. And just letting people know that we are moving forward and we're not necessarily supporting the browsers that they're using, but there are other options for them. We ended up supporting Internet Explorer 8 as well, which can be a bit of a challenge with responsive sites. So you want to look at that. We knew from looking at our analytics that Internet Explorer 8 was a must. We had to support that for our audience. So make that decision early on, and your development team can adapt to that from the beginning. So another sort of tip and trick for you is it's about sharing content, and you might think this is strange. It doesn't necessarily relate to a responsive design, but to me it's more than that. It's about being able to, your content needs to be free. It needs to be able to be shared in other situations like social networks. So this is an example from LinkedIn, and this is sharing a blog post, and we screwed this up really bad. I would say this is probably our biggest mistake on the project, is we didn't make this content easily shareable. So what you want to do is, with your own site, don't follow our bad mistakes, is you want to follow what's called the Open Graph protocol, and basically that just means you're structuring your content in a way that is really friendly towards sharing, and it follows this Open Graph format. And a lot of the major social sites use this format to share content. And so you can see our site, it kind of does something crazy with the image. Poor Chris's head is cut off. But a better example is down below there with CNN article. It shows the image, it actually has a few images, and it shows the article title and description, etc. So just, it's a little minor point, but you want to make your content easily shareable, easily accessible, no matter where somebody is viewing it. So whether it's on a social network, whether it's on a different device, whatever it is, it's got to be really easy. So just to kind of sum up the section, what we found with responsive, overall, it's really important that you make sure you take time to figure out what your process will look like, especially for the first time, because it can take more time than you expect. It can be complicated. There's a lot of learnings that happen the first time you go through this, but it's a really good long-term investment, and we really believe in this strategy, and moving forward, it's almost a non-negotiable in our projects. It's something that we just have to do if we're starting something from the ground up. It's looking at a responsive approach. So what I wanted to throw this little section in is thinking about, now that we've learned all of these things, there's some great lessons here related to responsive design, and it's definitely the future. But what if you're not able to start a new site from scratch? What if you're not able to get going in this way right away? You're not in that ideal state. So I wanted to walk through an example of another project that we've just finished recently, and we're calling this kind of lightweight responsive. This is a website for the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. It's called Oil Sands Today, and it's a site that's aimed at basically helping Canadians understand the oil sands and understanding their impact, and helping to educate, maybe explain different perspectives and that kind of thing. And it's a pretty rich site. It has a lot of information, imagery and stats and graphs to help people delve in and really understand this important issue in sort of today's world. But they had some challenges with their mobile experience. So they built this site I think, last year in 2012. And when people looked at it on a mobile device, they kind of got a similar experience. They got all the content, which is great. They can kind of explore some of that stuff, but it was really challenging. You had to pinch and zoom. It wasn't necessarily optimized for this kind of scenario. Large images really slowed the page down. So it became a problem, so much so that people would leave the site, especially on mobile devices, after about 3 seconds. So it was a high bounce rate, and they really wanted to improve this. However, they had just launched the website, so they just launched it a year ago, and they weren't necessarily ready to, we didn't want to upgrade it, or we didn't want to invest in kind of a re-platforming or redesigning right from the ground up. And we didn't want to also blow out the budget. We had some budget constraints, and we didn't want to over-engineer sort of a temporary solution. So we looked at what we're calling a lightweight responsive web approach to kind of augment the existing site and provide a better user experience for those smaller screens. So one of our big goals is that we wanted to use the same content on the desktop experience with a better user experience. So just to kind of get technical a little bit, we wanted to make sure that we were adding things in our CSS, in our style sheets, that were mobile specific, and that we could, based on our learnings from doing responsive projects, we could still leverage all of the content and the offering processes as they existed today, and just strip away kind of the unnecessary stuff and optimize really for the mobile experience. So this is what we ended up with. We ended up designing something that really kind of gets people into the information right away, and it's something that's presented in kind of a clear, readable format. We went with our practice of having a minimized navigation menu so that there's less panning and zooming. You're not kind of scrolling across to understand and see the different sections. We've limited the amount of images that are being loaded as well. The headings are bigger. As well, we have more space and a bigger area for people's fingertips, so basically those touch targets. So we really allow people to get in a bit easier as well. So we were happy with this approach because it really improved the user experience. It helped us focus for that audience on what matters, a better reading and a better navigation experience, and hopefully improving their bounce rate as well, people aren't abandoning. We used as part of our responsive framework for this, we based it on the Mobify framework, so if you want to check it out, I recommend it. It was a good starting point for us because it helped us adapt the site to initially render as just text only, and it included references to the images and assets and files and videos, but none of them downloaded right away. They didn't download on that initial visit, and it helped us reduce the number of requests and reduce the number of the page weight itself, so it loaded a lot faster. And also, I just wanted to point this out too. We did this, I think it was about a week is what I heard. It was pretty low cost and low effort. We didn't redesign the whole thing from the ground up, and we kept it lightweight. We used some of our responsive techniques in our development, in our user experience development process, but we kept it really lightweight and something that hopefully we created a better experience for folks. So just kind of leave you with this. One thing that if you're thinking about being future-friendly, you're thinking about creating a site that's really accessible across different contexts, different devices, different scenarios, you have to be really flexible. Approaches can vary. We took an approach where starting from the beginning, starting from the ground up, was kind of a great way for us to learn and to figure out stuff, as well as combining that with a lightweight approach. It can vary depending on where you are in your own website and your own website design. So be comfortable with the unpredictable. I know it's really tough, but that's something that really got us going in a great way. And with that, we're kind of at the end of our time here, so I think we have about 15 minutes or so for some questions. So I think we've been getting some questions on the chat so far, so we'll try to address some of those. Pablo?
Yeah, so I just want to address, I know some of you had some challenges calling in at the beginning. Don't worry, we do have a recording, so we'll be sending that out to you after so that you can catch up on whatever you missed. We have been collecting some questions, so what we'll do right now, and if you have questions right now, please send them through the chat box to the host, and then we can add those onto this list that we have right here. So let's go with question number 1, Jazz. How much reworking of content did you need to do for the responsive site? And of the content, what took the most time to complete?
Okay, so this is we reworked everything. We basically had a mandate that we wanted our content to really explain what we do and really be down to earth. And one thing we were trying to do as well is kind of reduce the amount of consulting speak that we had on our old site. So we started from scratch, and that was a very conscious decision. It was driven not only by making the site more responsive, but also driven by the fact that we had a new brand as well. So those two things sort of, I guess, helped us decide that we really need to invest in this and make sure that we were doing something right from the start. And it was a challenge. It was something that, you know, for us, we started at the beginning thinking, okay, we knew content was going to be a challenge. We knew that that's often one of the hardest things on a project. But when we just focused only on the content, it became really hard, and we had all these discussions that didn't go anywhere. So getting everybody together in those sketching sessions and having Chris in the room who really understood our messaging and our content and our brand, as well as user experience people and having our developers, we could kind of mash all that together and make it work in a really great responsive way. I would say, though, we're not perfect yet. We still have some ways to go with our content. There's some places where, we might have optimized too much for a desktop experience, and it's just too much to go, span across different devices. But we're working through that. We're trying to get better and learn as we go.
Sorry, there was another question about content. I just want to make sure we're covering that too. The question was kind of around, was it more challenging around the actual tone, messaging of the brand, or the technical aspect? I think you can.
Yeah, I think the tone, messaging, and brand, I don't know, I'm looking at Chris as well, he's in the room. That was really hard. We had a lot of different iterations for that. But we had some also technical challenges too. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at different scenarios and not creating headings that were too long, and then we had to shorten things and all that kind of stuff. So a responsive design can really exasperate, I can't say that word, some of those challenges. If you're already looking at tone and messaging, and then adding the responsive layer on top of that, can add some points. But I think thinking about it early, to me, that's my best advice. Really think about it early, get it going, get people understanding the design and the panels and the components and how all this stuff fits together. We got different content owners in the organization involved about, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks before the site went live, so that we could start getting their ideas out. And we started with just sketching with those guys, and then we moved into either quick sketches, more in Balsamic, or we moved into Word documents. So it just depended on who we were working with, and then we could put that into the site as soon as possible.
Yeah, just to add to that, so I was doing a little bit of the content writing. What was great is when we did do the brand launch, there was a lot of education around the tone and the messaging and the way that we wanted to come across and tell our stories. So as a content writer, when you have that guidance, it really helps to pull together that consistent content for your site. So that's with regards to content. I'm going to jump to the next question we have, and I might need some explanation on this, but can you explain the target divided by context equals results formula? Does that ring a bell?
Sorry, no,
okay. Okay, we'll jump to the next one, and we'll just follow up with that individual to get more context. Let's go to the next question. What issues did you, can you speak more to breakpoints and how you went about determining where a major or minor one would occur?
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I covered that a bit quickly. What we started out with was, we kind of think of it as small, medium, large, or if you think about Goldilocks, what is the ideal size? So we started with 3. We started with more of the smartphone size, then more of the tablet kind of standard, more iPad-ish size, as well as the desktop 1024 by 768 size. We introduced minor breakpoints once we got the site into code and we started to see it. We introduced some more minor breakpoints in there, and that was really more driven, like I said, by content and design. I don't have the exact resolutions or how many minor breakpoints we have, but I think there are about 2 or 3 additional breakpoints in there. We probably should have introduced 1 or 2 more, like I showed you that bad example, and so we're still working through that.
There's a couple other ones on breakpoints, so I'm just going to stick to those. For media breakpoints, were there any major browser type ones or mostly resolution based?
I will have to check with my user experience developers, but I believe it was mostly resolution based.
Okay, so we'll put that one aside.
We'll clarify that one. That's a good one.
Do you guys do high fidelity visual design for multiple breakpoints / screen sizes?
Yeah, we did actually. So in those mock-ups, I showed you the sort of desktop evolution. We did a full page mock-up as well for some of our smartphone size screens, especially for areas that were more unique. So on our team directory, that was an area that we wanted to make sure really showcased our people. And so we invested time in that, and we had a mock-up for that. For that one specifically, for team directory, we also did a slightly different experience for particularly mobile devices. So if you were using your phone, we did at the top, there's a little search bar. And so if you're on your desktop, if you're on your PC, that search bar stays at the top as you're scrolling the page. But that didn't make as much sense in the mobile scenario, so we actually changed that experience. So we did some full fidelity mock-ups for key things like that, as well as the home page. So we, in order to get approval and design, getting our design direction approved, and our leadership team was happy, we did full fidelity mock-ups for both smartphone and desktop for the home page.
So here's another one. If you needed to redesign the site again today, what would you change in the overall process? I think we touched on some of these, but maybe some of the ones, the big headaches.
Yeah, we spun our wheels a bit at the beginning with content, I'd say. So I would try to get design and content working together as fast as possible. That's what I would change about that. And also with our design process, I think, we did a lot more full mock-ups on the desktop, I would say more than anything else. So we kind of fell into a desktop trap. And I would try to get out of that. I'd be very conscious of that next time and focus more so on panel components and how those scale across different scenarios, less about these full pages in 1024.
Okay. And I think got one more there. So how do you keep the focus on your story, and why is it important to do this? And by story, I'm assuming you're needing to have a narrow story.
Yeah, so a big part of it, our old site, we really felt, and we had some feedback about this, is that it didn't really explain what we do. It was hard for people that are new to us, whether for hiring, client work, whatever. It was hard for people to understand what we do, how we're different. So that's kind of where that story concept, it came. And our brand centered around, creating thriving workplaces and doing that through technology, through employee portals, customer portals, and member portals. And the structure of our site, and I didn't touch on this because this is less of a responsive issue, but the structure of our site is actually employee portals, customer portals, member portals. This is very contentious. It didn't really make sense to people initially. We usability tested this. Didn't always make sense either, but we stuck to it because this is what we do. This is really how we feel through technology and through these different solutions, we help organizations thrive. And this probably, longer term might change. We might change how the site is structured, but it was something we really believed in and helped us share our stories because everything falls out from that. So it was case studies, it was about our people, about the work that we've done. Through our photography, we share a lot of that stories as well. So that's kind of what I mean by story. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, and more than content as well, Jazz touched on this with images, is we're telling our story through really vibrant colors and imagery using our own people. So our story actually came through in their expressions and so forth. So
yeah,
it was really hitting all senses.
Yeah, all senses, if it's possible for a website.
Yeah. So here's another one. Given your lessons learned on this project, would you employ a user-centered design approach to new projects?
Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a big philosophy for us, is definitely making it user-centered, as well as we have a lot of input from stakeholders and other people as well. So it's not just user-centered, that's a big part of it for sure, but we also have a lot of input from different areas of the business. We have to balance that. So we're always in this constant juggling, balancing act, and I believe that's really important. It's not just one thing.
So here's a question, this actually came up when we were chatting as well, is you talked about designing panels instead of designing full pages.
Yeah.
But if you're designing these separately, how do you ensure consistency across the whole page?
That's a good question. So we need to have a solid design direction from the beginning. So we would still probably do a homepage design. That's probably non-negotiable, and maybe an interior page or something like that. So you kind of get the feel of this is what an entire page for 1024, for a smartphone, and probably a medium size in there, what those pages kind of feel like. And then moving quickly into different panels. We actually designed more than 2 pages, and that was probably too much. So the panels for us, probably to that style tiles approach, or just breaking it out into separate kind of images that people can kind of look at and get a sense of all the different ways that people, that we could present our options. And we had actually, by the end of the project, we had our panels actually defined. So we had what we called a big image panel, which I showed you. We had a case study panel. We had a tab switcher panel, that's what we called, we called a pill switcher actually. We had something we called a filing cabinet panel, which basically expands and collapses different things. So we came up with established design patterns. I just wish we had done that earlier.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more here. So any experience creating a navigation system that covers multiple depths of hierarchy, yet still works on a small screen?
Yeah, that's a really a good point. So our site is pretty flat, and we made that conscious decision. So what we have is a lot of top-level items. So you can see in our utilities, if you're looking at our site, the top links, there's a ton of them, and there's also the 3 main sections I mentioned, employee, customer, member. So that definitely helped us deal with a less deep site. If you don't have that option, though, and I totally understand, there's tons of large sites out there, or enterprise sites. There are different approaches, different design patterns, and I can help you with this offline. I can point you towards some different mobile design patterns that you can use to help deal with that.
Okay. So when you are designing the experiences iteratively for handheld and desktop, do you find the need to define different personas/scenarios for handheld, mobile, and desktop users?
Yeah, it's tough. My sort of philosophy with this is that the same information, the same kind of task, like we can't assume that people are trying to do different things across different devices. People just want to get their stuff done, and a lot of tasks span across different devices. So I might start something on my smartphone, start researching something, and do it somewhere else later, or I might just be really lazy and I do everything on my tablet because I hate opening my computer or waiting for it to load. So for me, it's really kind of hard to assume those things. We try to do in our projects as much sort of user research as possible just to understand behavior and what people are trying to achieve. And that, to me, is more important than trying to then figure out, oh, okay, this device is for that, this device is for that.
Okay. This question, I like this question too. Can you please expand on some of the usability testing techniques used for this project?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I would say we didn't do enough usability testing, and we didn't focus enough on doing it sort of in a really adaptable way so that we covered all these different scenarios of people using different devices. What we did is right at the end, sort of the day after we launched, we did remote usability testing. So we got representative folks, representative audience members for our site, so sort of prospective clients, current clients, people that know us, people that don't know us, someone that might want to be hired, that kind of stuff. We recruited those guys. We just did everything remotely, so we did everything over screen sharing and phone conferencing. And we watched people use our site on their desktop or their laptop, whatever computer that they had access to. At the end of the test, if we had time, we did a sort of a quick mobile touch with whatever kind of other devices people had. We asked them some questions about that and some of their initial first impressions. We need to do more testing, and that's something that we're looking to do as well in the future, is focusing more on some of the touch device testing. So we did it quickly as an add-on. I'd recommend doing it more, using other tools, using Reflector. There's some good tools out there to help you share touch devices and watch people as they're using them. That's really critical. If you can't get people to do it, I recommend just doing it yourself. Like pull out your own devices at random times during the day when you think people are going to be using your site. As your site's being developed, make sure you're really experiencing it, using it one-handed, using it on the bus, using it in all those places, and that can really help elicit some of the issues as well.
We're just at time. We're at 15 seconds to go. So just want a quick note that we will be following up with everybody and providing the recording of today's session with the Q&As in case you missed it. And if we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up with you on those. So thank you once again for making the time to join us this morning, and we wish you an awesome week and an amazing weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.